All right, as we're growing in different places, and if you're doing what I think you should do, which is go into international marketplaces, you're going to be getting money that's not the same. They may even call it dollars, but it's not going to be the same dollars. It's going to be like other dollars, or it might be euros or pounds or yen or pesos or something. Or if you have virtual assistants or suppliers in other countries and you want to pay them in this international world we're in, we have to understand how currency works. To dive into some of that, I am excited to have here Ryan Cramer from PingPong Payments. So, Ryan, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, what's up, Kevin? How are you?
Yeah, so glad to have you on. So, you and I chatted before earlier in the day on talking about going into Canada. So, folks can head on over to Crossover Commerce, your channel,
Yep.
to talk about that subject. And can hear me talking about that. But here now, we're going to talk to you about going into those international marketplaces. So you've got a podcast where you talk to folks. I think you're up to I think it was episode 53.
Yep, 53. Yep, we go live about 4 to 5 times a week, just with leaders in the e-commerce space, like you yourself talked about in Amazon Canada. Tomorrow, we're talking with Thrasio, obviously about international expansion, but also acquiring businesses on that level, doing multiple things with like brokers and then
Mm-hmm.
reimbursements. So we're talking a little bit about everything. It's not just money, but it's like what are some golden tips that you can take away, actionable insights that you can take away as an Amazon or e-commerce seller. So that's my point of view from our show. Crossover Commerce. We go live on our social media channels under PingPong Payments, and then that's where we do all the education there.
Okay, great. Yeah, I like what you guys have been doing, and helping folks, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to figure this out. And I truly
Mhm.
believe that there's a rising tide that lifts all ships. So how did you get into this world of Amazon e-commerce?
Yeah, it's a weird story. I think almost like anyone's story, it's not. And no one expects to get in this way. It
Right.
was by accident. Yeah, it was by accident. It was almost like it was like one of those movie stories. Like you have to have adversity when you get into it.
Right.
So I got into out of college, I was in the newspaper industry. I worked for a regional newspaper in southern Indiana, northern Kentucky, and southern Illinois, and I
Uh-huh.
was in charge of going business to business, selling newspaper advertising strategies. So that including banner ads, that included print ads, that included magazine inserts, you name it, we were selling it, doing monster.com listings for Amazon or companies who wanted to hire individuals, SEO, SEM optimizations. We knew everything. Like I was there to learn about the business and say, newspaper, look at our reach and like how to develop your reach to our serviceable area. So I did that for about a year and a half or so, and then about 5 months before I was supposed to marry my fiance at the time, I was laid off because the newspaper industry is
Oh
not a
yeah.
growing market.
No,
So
unfortunately.
I had yeah, that was just early December. So it was like right before Christmas. All of a sudden, I was like, I had my planner. They called me in and they're like, "You need to like cancel your appointments, all this stuff, and you're gonna be escorted out." And I go, what?" And being laid off is not fun for anyone out there. And I know a lot of people had to do that this
I've
year.
been
You're
through it
furloughed.
myself. It
Yeah,
stinks.
exactly. Yeah, I was over one right out of college, and I don't think those are great statistics. Like my college did not want to hear that for recruiting purposes. So I called my fiance at the time. And I said, I wasn't bad at my job. I was just younger than my other counterpart, and I say younger, more less experienced. So I was like cheaper to
Mhm.
get rid of. Um, so that's at least what I think. But when you kind of go through that, you're like all these different things like, hey, the world's out to get me, all this other stuff. But the first thing I did was like go work out, clear my head. I called my wife, well, fiance at the time, cleared my head, and then I went to work out. And then I was like, you know what? There's a reason for this. And so I don't know what it is, but it's gonna be good. So I left that city. I moved back home quickly. And then my wife and fiance again at the time, she got a job offer when she finished up her internship in Connecticut in Virginia. So she was like, "Hey, I'm moving out here for a job. You don't have a job. Maybe you can look for one out here." So I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So I moved out there and in the Richmond area, which I'm not familiar with, had no connections, no family, no nothing. I landed on this company called Evergreen Enterprises, which is a manufacturer and distributor from they manufacture in Ningbo, China, and then they distribute and wholesale their products, which is a selection of like 10,000 SKUs slash ASINs that they're selling to retail stores and whatnot. And long story short, they're trying to grow out their e-commerce business.
Mhm.
I was in charge of like uh, the branded site and trying to grow out the revenue source through there, direct to consumer. And that was done like branded, like our same products, selling them basically like a Shopify store if you were to compare the two. So what I did was I took a non-existent revenue channel, worked with like influencers and brands and coupon sites, and I built that channel out to 6 figures in revenue the first year, and then second year was 7 figures. So it was a growing business for me. It was not my products, but I had to actually learn, landed cost. I had to know like how much inventory we had in stock, how
Mm.
much I can sell it for. I had to compare it against our own listings, not get in trouble by any of my higher ups, and basically make sure we're still making a profit. That being said, I got to learn the industry in the space quite quickly. So I was working with like Ebates slash Rakuten. I was working with like deal sites and coupon sites and how to drive traffic from one source to another. And in the meantime, I was learning how the psychological nature of like buyers, how they're going through, what they're looking for in terms of seasonal products, what they're looking for in terms of like what's the perfect price point, stuff like that. So I really got a holistic view of e-commerce in general, and
Mhm.
that kind of allowed me to dive into it even further. So I did that for about 2 years. Was successful at that. Took a departure to move back to the Midwest, where I'm currently at, to be able to. Well, my job was to work for the Indiana Pacers and Indiana Fever, the NBA and WNBA team in the events space. But I really wanted to stay in the e-commerce space after working with them. So found opportunity with Viral Launch, which is a software company that helps
Mhm.
Amazon sellers get going um, here locally in Indianapolis, and then jumped in, kind of grew in expertise in that, and then Ping Pong came calling, and now I'm doing fintech. So it's almost like this holistic nature of what e-commerce is. I get to learn it firsthand. And help other people understand it as well, and just constantly asking the questions like, how can we help you? What are the best ways to help you grow? And now it's more the financial side of things as well.
Gotcha. So your background is a lot in marketing and e-commerce, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Knowing like how to stand out with people with your products, how to get in touch with like the right businesses, who you're going to correlate with, how are you going to collaborate in those capacities, and really just standing out in general. Those are my expertise. And no one knows all the answers, but it's a
Mhm.
lot of trial and error and knowing like what's successful and kind of iterating from there.
Gotcha, gotcha. What are you seeing, so you have a unique angle because 'cause you're not yourself a seller, right?
Correct. Yeah. I haven't opened that Amazon seller account, haven't opened my own third party label brand or anything like that. It's all on the service side and making sure people get pointed in the right direction.
Well, the interesting thing is you come at it from an angle that some of us get hung up in the baggage of, sometimes it's hard to see the forest through the trees. Like Carlos Alvarez, who is he's got the largest meetup of Amazon sellers in the world. And one of the things he
Yep.
talked about somewhere in an interview he was on, that he learns a lot from the people that are new, that ask new questions, and they're asking questions at angles he had never even thought of because they're not in that world, so they haven't lived it. So sometimes their questions are really powerful. um so I'm just kind of curious, like, what are you seeing as kind of the trends and where things are going right now?
Yeah, and you kind of hammered on a point, Kevin, of that is the perspective and value. I think like I never like hammer home and say like this is the right tool or this is the right way to do something. I say I understand that's a point of view you can come from, but there also might be other successful ways. Maybe we should take a look at those as well. And
Mhm.
I am not one to say like I worked formerly for Viral Launch. I will only use Viral Launch, things like that. It's hey, there's lots of fantastic, great tools out there. Let me know what if I have to compare them all together, that's what I'm going to do so I make the best decision for myself and as a business. So it's making sure people know that these places and tools exist, but then also like pointing the data in the right direction, like follow the data is what I always tout, is making sure that you're listening to the right things and finding those opportunities for you as sellers. So what I do, and I've got to listen to a lot of great minds through our podcast, is just what kind of trends that 2020 kind of unveiled, and then also like what that means for sellers kind of moving forward. And this is kind of my takeaway: is 2020 showed us a lot of like weaknesses, I think, in Amazon's system in terms of how they value a third party seller. And I say that for a couple different reasons. First being, at the beginning of 2020, Amazon all of a sudden made a note. Obviously, there's pandemic, there's a lot of things shutting down, but Amazon said we're going to prioritize certain products over others. We are going to determine what is necessity over what is not. And as a third party seller, I'm going to be carrying my hand on the table saying, of course, my product is a necessity. Like,
Yeah.
what dog needs, like every dog needs their dog toy. Like, why am I left off the table? Why can't I sell on Amazon anymore? And everyone forgets Amazon is a marketplace. They have control over what comes and goes. There's often times where people are like, Amazon's out to get me. And that may or may not be true. Like, that's not, there's no like evil side about it, but they own the marketplace. And
They have
as a
their
seller,
perspectives. Yeah.
right, they have their own perspectives, and at any time they can change their terms and services however needs to be behoove them. And that's scary for a lot of sellers. And I think that 2020 showed that, because when you can't get your inventory into Amazon, you might have been lucky and you might have gotten in there just in time. It might have lasted through the 2 or 2.5 months, I think, when they didn't allow inventory to get in there. You might have been lucky, and that would have been great. But if you're only selling on Amazon and that's your sole business, those are 2 months of that you're not selling or potentially run out of stock, and you might not be able to either rank your product or continue to keep that rank. You might not launch a new product. Everything gets backed up. So solely relying on just Amazon, I think, is the first takeaway I tell people: is you can't solely be on one marketplace. You have to be diversified. Whether it's multiple Amazon marketplaces, that's great. Start there, because that's where a lot of eyeballs exist. But if you can only survive on Amazon alone, you're not a strong brand, or it's not a strong business in terms of, if something happens to Amazon and again, my inventory isn't accepted anymore, or they put limits on it, which is what a lot of people are saying. I can't launch a product with 200 units. I can only last so long. I need to get 1,000 at least. Well, Amazon doesn't allow you to do that. So just being solely reliant on those marketplaces, that's tough. So I tell people, start having those plans and strategies, looking at different marketplaces, getting to the forefront of whether it's, being ahead of the curve if you're in like Europe or Australia or Japan, which have great traction. There's not a lot of competition. So maybe you start moving more of your inventory there. Building your brand off of Amazon. So being fluid where you can start selling on your own Shopify store, or selling in different marketplaces like Rakuten, which is very popular in Japan, or Mercado Libre, which is the #1 marketplace in South America and Central America. All those different places where shoppers exist that not a lot of people think about. There's just a lot of different ways that you can diversify and be more secure. Although not being the strongest numbers for Amazon.com, you can still shoot those like pains that you might go through for a couple months while you're kind of figuring that out. You still have inventory and availability in those different marketplaces for people to still consume your product. So that's what I'm seeing a lot of trends. And I keep telling people, diversify, like be as many places as you can be. If it's not a lot of inventory, at least test it. See what works and be successful in that regards. Because if Amazon figures out how to open up that Southeast Asia corridor, I should say, with like Singapore and Japan and all those island nations, they can figure out how you can logistically get products to those nations quickly. That's a billion plus people that you can instantly tap into if once they open up that corridor and they figure out logistically how to do that. So
Interesting.
those are all those kinds of possibilities that you might want to be there
Well,
before the trend happens, if that makes sense.
sure. So when you say diversify off of Amazon, you mean Amazon.com, or do you mean like, focus your, figure out eBay and your Shopify store, or
Yeah.
start focusing on Amazon's international marketplaces?
So if you so I say people like it's a multiple tiered approach, right? So it's
Mhm.
.com. You start with .com. I think everyone in the right mind is like start on .com because
Oh,
that's where
yeah, there's
eyeballs
no way
are.
around it.
Like, yeah, it would be silly for you to start scaling a business when you're not on .com. Like that's where the buying power is. That's where a lot of eyeballs are. It just makes sense.
Mhm.
So start there, be successful on there. You're taking your Amazon business to a next level, grow in a different marketplace on Amazon. So whether that's Europe, so Europe is 66% of their European business happens through Europe or through UK, and then followed right behind by Germany. Those two flip flop most notably, but they're doing 66% of your business. So if you want to talk to Europe, talk to those two marketplaces.
Okay, so
I
you're
say market,
saying UK from what statistics you've seen, UK and Germany are about 66% of Europe.
yeah, and then the rest
That
is
makes sense.
followed right behind by like Italy, Spain.
Yeah, for me, it's actually probably
Like
even higher than
they're good
66%
marketplaces. Yeah, I would say like that's a generous like amount, but
for the
marketplaces
other
2 and 3,
marketplaces.
right? Yeah, that's generous for the other marketplaces. Like Italy's good, they're okay.
Yeah.
Spain is doing all right, but I would say like they keep rolling out to different European countries.
Netherlands,
But
Sweden's
yeah,
coming up.
Netherlands, Poland was just announced. I think .pl. So all those different ones exist because Amazon's going to start, saying, hey, if you're in the Netherlands, you can
Mhm.
start fulfilling in Poland or you can start fulfilling in all those different countries. That makes sense. You definitely want to be there, but you start with Germany, you start with the UK. Like that's hands down. In Asia, it's still now Japan. Like that's where you need to be if you want to start talking to the Asian nations. Like be in Japan, even though Rakuten is very much the marketplace to be on. Japan is technically the third largest shopped marketplace in the Amazon ecosystem.
Mhm.
So you're talking about those 3 to 4 marketplaces to be succinct. You start to see growth in Australia. I think like we talked about Canada earlier today. It's the one that no one wants to talk about for some reason, but it's
Right,
so
but it's
easy to
one of
get
the
into.
easiest ones to get into
Easy.
and
Yeah,
relative to the sales you'll get.
exactly. So easy to fulfill if you're in the United States. Mexico is just kind of this, it's a culture that a lot of people are like, once it catches up, it will catch up and it'll start to grow quickly. And then once Amazon figures out South America, which again, I think is in the plans, if not coming up, South America and Central America, you really start to see a good, I think, foothold in there. So those are like the upcoming ones. Selling in India, obviously, when that becomes available for United States sellers to be doing it, if it's not already. I have
Right,
to
because right
really
now you
look.
have to kind of have an Indian
Yeah, you have to have an established presence
presence.
in India.
Yeah,
So that's exactly like
there's a
kind of
cart
the
horse
weird.
problem there,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
chicken
Well,
egg.
and yeah, and they want to protect. And talking with like Meghala Barwaj of like India Sourcing Show, she sounds like they're very protective of the economy and the ecosystem there, which I understand completely. You want to protect a seller and the economy in India first. You don't want outside competitors to come in, sweep, and essentially defeat uh Amazon sellers or e-commerce sellers in India. Like you have
Right.
Flipkart, you have all those other ones, but outside competition, they really protect themselves on it. So once that gets opened up, hopefully, potentially, eventually, that'll be huge. Like you're just instantly talking to billions of people. Like once you're ready and have the systems in place, like the audience that opens it up to is amazing and astounding. So those are the ones you like always be up to date on, like what different marketplaces are have the opportunity. Now, the second part of that, diversify off of Amazon, obviously, would be on like if you want to build a brand solely on like that has value, you can build it on Shopify, which a lot of people are starting to do. You can fulfill your Shopify orders from Amazon through that program that we talked about, the MCF program. It makes sense you can do that as well.
Multi-channel fulfillment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
multi-channel fulfillment program. So that's something you can tap into pretty quickly. Um, Rakuten, again, I talk about Rakuten, where a lot of shopping happens. It just depends on each nation because of the culture around what was built out before Amazon. Like Amazon's only in 18 countries, if you think about it. It's weird to think about. It's only 18, and there's 200-ish plus countries around the world, maybe more. I forget the exact total,
Hmm.
but it's weird to think about that. Even though it talks to a lot of those marketplaces, there's still so much growth potential that can happen. But while that's happening, there's other marketplaces that serve those nations. Like I said, Mercado Libre for South America and Central America. That's a lot. That's a billion or so people that you can talk with in Brazil and all those nations down there, Mexico even.
Mhm.
So that's an opportunity. In Asia, again, Rakuten, uh, Flipkart. If there's a possibility to work with Walmart in that capacity. But marketplaces in general for the United States, think about this: Walmart.com going to continue to grow. Target just opened up their marketplace, or they're starting to open it up to sellers. Target, if I walk in a Target retail store, I'm walking out with $100 worth of goods that I have no idea I wanted when I walked in there. I think their e-commerce platform will continue that like weird ecosystem as well. But it makes sense to see these trends like, how do we replicate what Amazon does? And for third-party sellers to fulfill their goods on our ecosystem, you open it up as a marketplace. So that will just continue to trend, I think, moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's such a big point, is that, you know, more and more of the world is going to e-commerce. There's a screenshot I took. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was like a graph of e-commerce as a percent of total retail sales. And it was like April 2020, this huge, like, kind of like jump up, like,
Yeah.
went from, like, let's say 12% to 17% or something like that. Like, that's pretty
Yeah.
significant. And if you're Target and Walmart, and maybe you got a little bit of an online presence, you're not just going to say, oh, well, I guess we're just gonna have to close down some stores. Is what
Yeah.
it
No
is.
kidding.
No, they're gonna say,
Mhm.
let's figure out this online thing is, because that's where the customers are going.
When I talked to my guests on the show, like I talked with Chris Schifferling, not Schifferling, Chris Freiberger. He's with InReach. He's technically called this Amazon matchmaker, and what his job is to find Fortune 100 businesses, how to problem solve how they're not on Amazon, how to get them in e-commerce or on Amazon in general. And that's something that these billion-dollar entities still haven't figured out, and it's baffling because, again, think about it this way: you as a third-party seller and this is how he put it, you are um, you are one of these speedboats, right? You can ebb and flow as a
Hmm.
seller no matter how the waves come. These Fortune 100 companies are cruise ships. They're to the Titanic. They can't move out of way of an iceberg that's coming at them very quickly. They have
Right.
to absolutely like put all this effort and have to see it off in the distance quite far in order to even miss it. You as a third party seller can ebb and flow quicker than what these entities are, but they're quickly starting to try to figure out and throw money at it. How can we start getting on e-commerce, because that's where a lot of buying happens? I think the statistic you're referring to is like, of all retail shopping, or like shopping in general holistically,
Hmm.
still like 90% to 90 or to 85 to 90% of it still happens in retail stores worldwide. Like, so that means only 15% of transactions are happening on e-commerce. And of that 100%, only 1% or something crazy like 1% or 2% is happening on Amazon.com. Of all of buying power in the world, only 1% or 2% is happening on Amazon.com. And I started to think about that. I'm like, that's crazy to think like that. That's not right. But
Hmm.
billions of people around the world, instead of going down the street, going to a grocery store, that's where commerce is happening. A lot of people just think it's on Amazon, or you as an Amazon seller is like, I can't diversify anymore on Amazon. That's not true. You're just in the beginning wave, and you just don't take a 10,000-foot view of it and say, holy cow, even though Macy's is struggling or like all these retail stores are struggling, they're still doing billions of dollars in revenue every single year. It's just slowly starting to see the scales tilt in one favor. So knowing that's happening, knowing these other marketplaces exist, and you as a third party seller, like, hey, I can get on this wave, as you said, as the tides kind of rise, you as a seller and as an entrepreneur can rise with it. There's so much opportunity out there, and it's just the beginning of it.
It's an interesting statistic about 1% of total worldwide sales is on Amazon.com. I guess I'd have
It
to,
wasn't it wasn't a lot.
yeah.
It was something like 1 or 2%, and you thought like of all retail sales,
Well,
or like
most
of all
people
like
live outside of the US, because I know
exactly.
what you're saying. Because, like, in the US, I want to say it's something like 40 or 50% of
Online sales.
online sales happen on Amazon. So it's
But if
very
you're looking
dominant
at
here in the
commerce,
US. But
exactly,
we
but you look at all of commerce in general,
right,
it's
we have a
still like
very US
very long
centric
way to
world
go.
view sometimes. Yeah.
Exactly. That's our fault, and we apologize on behalf of the world. or on behalf of the United
Right.
States world. But it's just crazy to think about. Like, I talked with August Klagis of Orange Click, and he's like talking with sellers in Slovenia and like all
Mhm.
those other like Eastern Europe countries. They would just rather walk down the street, buy something there instead of wait maybe like a day or two for goods. It's just not culturally like each culture is different, and that's where the American mentality I think comes into our own way. Is we think about, oh yeah, the world thinks like us, like of course it's going to be like this way or no other way. And that's not true. We are just a very small minute way of thinking. But like how the Mexican culture looks at it is it's a little bit slower. It's like, I don't care if I get my groceries in 2 hours. Like, that's not a big deal to me. I will take my time. I will get my product when I get it, and I will complete my task when I get it done. And I want to enjoy the process as I go. Like, same with manufacturing, same with like shopping. It's just not a trend that's really picked up yet. And like the United States is like, give me more. I want to spend more money without saving it. Like, we're just like on this edge of like buy everything when we can possibly, and then like not save. It's we're just our own ecosystem. Like, other people exist and have different ways of thinking about buying
Right,
online.
and they
And
buy stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, all right.
So
So in other countries, people are buying stuff, and you can get funds in other currencies, because
yep.
people are buying stuff. And one of the things that Amazon recently, coincidentally, announced was they have a new payment service provider program where in it they said that there was only a handful of companies that did it, and I know Ping Pong was one of them. And
Yep.
actually, for U.S. sellers, I want to say it was only like maybe there was a couple companies that were on there. Ping Pong was one of the ones for U.S. sellers, which was interesting. And so let's dive just real deep into, I don't even know if I'd heard the term payment service provider before. Is that just the term they used for that particular um, press release?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So by definition, a payment service provider has this really like big scope, right? Payment service provider can be a Square, or it can be a PayPal. It can be
Mm,
anywhere where money as a commerce happens. And that's what's kind of confusing is like when you make announcements like that, what does it mean as a seller? I'll talk about just like how how companies exist in this space in general. Fintech is going to continue to grow, and what people don't understand is that as e-commerce has disrupted the shopping landscape, fintech is disrupting how money happens. So with currency and how money is exchanged around the world, how it used to be done is all through banks, right? If
hmm
I wanted to receive euro, I would have to fly over to a European nation. I would have to establish a business entity there. I would have to have a person who's in charge of my like European expansion or part of my business entity there. And then with those documents, I can open up a bank account on behalf so I can receive the pound or the euro or anything like that. And that's not how commerce can happen now. Like, it doesn't have to happen that way. That's really slow. Time is a commodity that none of us have enough of, but it's something that we can never get back. So anytime you can save time, that's going to be more valuable to any individual with business than if just for lack of like convenience or lack of just money in general. Like, time is the one. If you could save that, you're going to bring more value to any other person out there. So what fintech companies like us do is we are a cross-border payment solution. So anytime that you want to open a bank account in a different country, you can now, instead of flying overseas and spending all that time to open it, you can actually go onto our website, and under 5 minutes, like literally 5 minutes, you can sign up for a free account. You can open up a digital bank account with a tier one bank. When I say tier one, I mean like if you could name only 10 banks in the world, like brands of banks, and those first 10 that you spat off, those are the people we work with, like a Chase, a Wells Fargo, a Citibank, HSBC. Those are the banks that we work with. And on their behalf, like on you as a seller's behalf, you open a digital bank account on their behalf, and you open up like a bank account in a Chase or a Citibank instead of going there in person and doing that. So we actually do that, save that time, money, and effort for you as a seller. So that's saving the time part. The money part is when you're receiving in multiple currencies. So if you're a seller listening to this and I'm like, I want to get into the Canada, like we keep talking about Canada, and you don't
Sure.
realize it, Amazon.com or .ca is going to pay you out in Canadian dollars. Well, if I'm an Amazon seller, what the hell am I going to do with Canadian dollars? I can't pay my employees out with Canadian dollars. Doesn't yield. I can't go to the marketplace and spend Canadian dollars or hand them what looks like monopoly money. I think it's funny how it looks like. Same with the euro. I can't hand them something like that and get goods for it. So I have to use my own local currency, and that's basically our solution allows you to transact that money instead of doing it through a traditional bank. You can do it through our ecosystem, and you can save money by doing that. The old way of doing it was the bank will tell me what exchange rate I can get, and then they will charge their fees on top of it because you're exchanging probably a couple $100, if not a couple $1,000. It's not a lot for a bank. As much as you might think it's a lot of money, it's not a lot for a bank. And every single transaction they do, they have to spend their time to convert it over to this funds. They're going to charge you whatever they want to do. Basically, I say within reason. It's a big fee just to transact that money from one currency to another, and you, the seller, are going to you're going to pay for it. Like that. That's the long story short.
Right. So basically, as we understand it, so just so everyone kind of understands a little bit more, if I Google USD to CAD, US dollar to Canadian dollar, it gives me a rate. Is that the rate that I'm going to get in an exchange?
So that's a good question. So when you're talking about exchange rates, that's like the global e-commerce rate. Mid-market rate is basically what businesses would get business to business if you were sending currency.
Or bank to bank, right?
Right, bank to bank, essentially. Yeah, exactly. So it's actually a little bit better than what you'd probably get. Mid-market rate is what like businesses will charge if you're going to do business to business in a banking setting. So instead of sending like through like PayPal, your buddy, like I'm going to send you 10 euros and stuff like that. You can do that through PayPal and they'll convert it for you. Like that's easy, but they'll charge you like 5-6%. And like on $10, that's, a dollar or whatever it is that currency is. But when you're talking about like, as Amazon sellers, we're talking about like thousands upon thousands of dollars, if not six figures to buy goods, or you're selling six figures a month in Germany, for example, and you need to get back to USD, you're talking about like 4 or 5% of that revenue and is charged as a fee. You're talking about a big chunk of money. You're talking about a couple 5 figures that you're just paying in fees just to convert that over to you.
Well, just real quick to make sure I'm understanding this right. And so basically, simplistically for folks, anytime money changes from one currency to another, there's a little bit of a loss there, right?
Yep, of course. And that's
compared to the mid-market rate.
Yeah. So that's how banks make their money.
Right.
Just like just any other rate. Once it's converted, they will charge almost like a convenience fee, right? They will convert it for you, but at a cost. So they'll charge on top of that exchange. They will take a cut of it and then make you pay for it, and then not give you exactly everything you're owed, but at a cost, they'll give you that exchange.
Okay. So then Amazon, going back to your example of the Canadian dollars, they can't put Canadian dollars into Bank of America in the US or whatever bank you use. I'll just use Bank of America because it's easy to make it the distinction of where it's located, just based on the name. So
we don't work with Bank of America, but yes, exactly. Right. Like American Bank, if you have an American bank, you need the funds to get back to you. Yes, go ahead.
So Amazon can, if you put in your US routing and account number, just to use US as an example here, when they're moving it over, they can't take Canadian dollars and say, here, Bank of America, you figure it out. They have to say, here's US dollars, Bank of America, and Amazon charges a fee. Now, the interesting thing is you don't see that in your statement. So if you go in your statement and you look at all the fees, it's not going to say that. It's just, if you were to compare what the mid-market rate was at that moment in time, because they're just going to, at the moment, so if it's 5 o'clock on every other Saturday, you get your disbursement, whatever the rate was, they're just baking in, so to speak, their fee into that rate. And it's not they're being deceptive. That's just how currency works. So what you should do, I think sellers should do, is minimize some of those transactions where money changes hands. And so PingPong is one of the payment service providers where you can put money into a local account. So if I wanted money to go into Canadian dollar account, you'd give me the Canadian version of a routing and account number for
Yep.
Chase or whatever, right?
100%. Yeah. And you do that once you sign up for a bank account. We have 10 currencies you can actually receive funds in. And that's like Canadian dollar, USD, Mexican peso, the pound, the euro, Japanese yen, Hong Kong dollar, Australian dollar, AED, which is for United Emirates. There's a couple other ones I'm blanking on.
There's a
Japanese
few.
yen.
Okay, so
Yeah, there's a couple. So there's a couple, but like you can, there's over 160, 170, 160 different currencies out there. So if you're talking about like the top where Amazon ecosystem is, that's where a lot of, you can receive in those funds, so that instead of having the Amazon convert it for you, they'll do it at a cost again, just like a bank. They don't want to have to do all these small transactions too. You can receive your funds, your payment remittance every 2 weeks to a PingPong account, and then hold on to that whenever, like you said, minimalizing transactions, which is great for saving costs. So you can use those funds to rack it up. You're not accruing any fees or anything like that. There's no monthly stuff to have an account. There's no monthly fees for holding it within that currency. It's just there under your bank account. And then when you get to a certain threshold, if you want to convert it over to, again, your local currency, you can have that exchange happen whenever you deem fit. And that can be done if the currency is good, and you're like, hey, the dollar's down or the dollar's high. I'm going to get as much as I can out of that dollar, and I can transact it back to that. Or you can use those funds to pay out like the supplier or your VA or your freelancer with those same receiving funds. You're just not making those back and forth transactions, because anytime an exchange hands, that's where a fee is going to incur.
Yeah, and so just to kind of demonstrate, I think in a way that people can understand is, if they had PPC charges and PPC was going onto a credit card, let's just say they have their US dollar credit card, pays off Canadian dollar charges, and then eventually they're going to have to pay that credit card off with the Canadian dollars that switch back to US dollars. So they're paying twice, as opposed to if it all comes within their disbursement, then there's no charges. And this is even on top of if your bank charges you international transaction fees, which is a other separate thing. So now with what, correct me if I'm wrong, PingPong allows you to do is you can also pay, like if you had an accountant in that country, you could pay them in the local currency and not have to worry about conversion fees or a prep center or something along those lines. Am I right?
Yeah. So good question. So being able to pay out, like you're talking about, like VAs or any sort of like outside entity, almost like a supplier, like you can pay directly with your supplier by using our solution. So just like a bank account, if you're making a wire, you can do the same thing with us. You would just need to know exactly where you're paying to. If it's an international entity, you can just get that account routing number. We verify it for you to make sure it's like a legitimate transaction, like, hey, they have legitimate banking credentials, all this other stuff. So we're trying to protect you on that behalf. Second on that behalf is that you can make it from your own home, so you don't have to go to a bank, make an international wire transfer to your supplier. But suppliers aren't the only thing as third-party sellers or brands have to pay. You have to pay employees, you have to pay VAs, which are in different countries, like most commonly in Philippines or in Vietnam and whatnot. So you can pay them in local currency. So you can tell them, hey, I can pay you out in local currency, so you don't have to convert the funds. That makes it easier for them to, like, a peace of mind to know that, hey, you can pay them out, has a building relationship trust. Same with your suppliers. If you pay them out in China, if you have a supplier in China, you can pay them in local currency in RMB or CNY. And most banks, if you open up a bank account, they'll cap you like 1,000 or 2,000 RMB or CNY to pay out a supplier because you're an outside the country entity. With us, you actually have uncapped potential. You can pay out in RMB and CNY. So that's another benefit for using us. But there's always money coming and going. A lot of people just don't understand, like, you think it's a cost of doing business when all these fees incur, and there's so many places where you don't have control over fees. But this is one, like, bright shining light in the industry where you can have like control over, hey, I can save, instead of pay 4 to 5% on fees, I would only maybe pay 1% on a fee, or 0.85 or 0.5% on that current conversion. if you're doing that and you compare it to that rate that ping pong can give you, that's money that you're saving. You can put to your inventory. You can put to paying out yourself. You can put to growing your business to a new level. So that's where the real time savings, you can see like apples and orange, or like apples to apples, how much money you can actually put back into your pocket to reinvest in your business even further.
Well, one thing that was interesting, I give you guys kudos on, is when you and I first got connected, you explained one of the services you offered was similar to Zoom. XOOM is who I use to pay like my virtual assistants.
Yeah.
And I found like, okay, so let's say I pay him a salary twice a month. It was about $5 less, which isn't huge, but I do that 24 times a year.
Yeah.
That's $120, which just for using a
I
different
mean, if you
service where
want
it's
to,
literally
yeah,
the same thing.
I was gonna say, if you want to like get rid of $120, like, I mean, you can
Right.
pay me and then you feel better about using the same service. Like, that's fine. Like, I don't care about that. But it's like, why would you just leave my, we say this is the phrase we use. Why would you leave money on the table? Like, it's almost like when you're raking in all the money you're theoretically trying to make on Amazon, you're just like leaving some of it on the table for someone else to take. Like, why would you do that? It's kind of a mind-boggling thing, but people just aren't educated in that space. And that's what we're trying to do is, hey, Amazon's not mad that I mean, like you said, like there's services out there that they trust and they say, hey, these entities know what they're doing. Like they go through all the compliance regulations. Like they are a business entity that, will handle these small transactions that we don't have to deal with. Like Amazon's in the business of, we want people to buy goods on our marketplace or use their web services. Like there's a lot of different things they would rather focus their time on
Mhm.
than all these different transactions that are happening. That's why companies like Payoneer exist. That's why TransferWise exists. That's why we exist. That's why, like, I will tell you all of my competitors, and I don't care. What I want you to do is go out there, and if you're using those services, I will say, if you're not asking for the best rate possible, you're doing yourself a disservice. Like Ping Pong will fight for you to save money, and they will say, like, this is what we can give you, and this is why, because you're of value to us. If you're not having that relationship with a third party seller, then you're doing yourself a disservice. You're leaving money on the table. And that's why I tell people all the time, a lot of companies do what we do, but if you're not shopping and you're not price shopping yourself, like you're doing yourself a disservice. Like I will say that all day long.
Well, and the interesting thing is too, and my understanding of the press release was if you're not with a company that is one of Amazon's authorized ones to receive your funds, Amazon's going to eventually stop sending them. So interesting thing to note. So if somebody wanted to learn more, follow your podcast or
Yeah.
learn more about PingPong Payments, where would they go?
Yeah. So I'll make sure that Kevin gets this link too. But if you guys want to learn more or just save more money, ask me questions about how the process works. My team is a white glove service team. What I mean by that is they will make sure they take care of you guys in terms of walking you through the process. How do you save money, what you're currently getting, and how we can help you with that. Go ahead and email me at ryan.cramer@pingpongx.us and just mention this podcast, Maximizing E-commerce, or just say like, hey, Kevin Sanderson said I should come over to you guys, or use the link below. We'll make sure that everyone that comes through there, the first month that they use ping pong, our fees are zero. Like that means we're not making money on you guys for the first month that you use us. So send and receive money through ping pong, use us and be as a trusted payment service provider for not just on Amazon. So guys, don't get me wrong, Amazon's great, but if you're growing like I hope you are doing this and you have a brand outside of just Amazon, Ping Pong also exists with those marketplaces and your Shopify store, all those ones holistically in one bubble. So you're not looking at all these different screens of like, I don't know how much money I actually am making. Like have it all in one place. It's safe, secure, reliable. But yeah, usa.pingpongx.com is our website to learn more information. But if you want the special deal, click on the link below in this video or in this description, or just email me directly and we'll make sure that you guys get hooked up.
Yeah, just go head on over to maximizingecommerce.com/9393. And in the show notes, we'll have Ryan's contact info as well as the link to learn more. So
That's exactly the phrase I was looking for. That exact website. So I appreciate that.
there you go. All right. Good deal. Well, it was great chatting with you, Ryan. And
Of course.
I definitely think as people go into international waters, they should look into, what their different options are and enjoy the conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin.